we still have people joining pretty quickly, I'm going to give us, another 30 seconds or so before I get started. We do have a lot of content for you all today, so we're really excited to start sharing that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Iris Kemp. I am a senior project manager at Long Live the Kings. I work on a lot of projects around the region, and today I'm here mostly to highlight the amazing work that our Lilliwaup Field staff do. Rick Endicott and Joy Waltermire, both on the call, and you can see their videos right now. Also on the call, we have Jack McDermott, and Jack is our project assistant at LLTK, and he is also on this call our tech support. So if you have any issues with your tech, you can private chat him, and he will be able to help you out. Jack and I are going to keep monitoring the Q&A as we go. I'm going to talk to you in just a minute on how to submit a question and how you'll get your question answered. But if you hear from someone behind the scenes, it's most likely me or Jack, just to put a face to the name. All right, looks like we're rapidly hitting capacity. So I'm just going to go ahead and start explaining how we're going to do Q&A today. So like I said, we have a lot of content prepared for you, some of it video, most of it us talking about our work on Hood Canal and at our Lilliwaup facility. As we go along, if you have questions that you'd like to see answered, you can go ahead and type them in the Q&A box. So on your screen, if you look at the base of your screen, if you're on a mobile device, it might actually also be in the top right corner. You should see this little Q&A sign. And on that Q&A sign, if you click it, it'll pop up a box that says question and answer. You can type your question into that box. You can click submit. You can send it anonymously if you choose. There is that option, or you can attach your name to it. Once that is sent in, you will also see the option to upvote a question. So if you're looking at the Q&A screen and you see that someone has asked a question that you also want to see answered, please go ahead and upvote it or comment on it to let us know that you also have that question. We will save some time for Q&A at the end of our webinar, and we will try to answer the questions that have the most upvotes and most comments first. We'll also, me and Jack behind the scenes, kind of try to answer some of your questions as we go along. But anything that we think are questions for our fish experts here, Joy and Rick, we will save to the end at that Q&A period. Once your question is answered, Kathy, already on it with the questions. I can answer that one for you later. Once your question is answered, it will move into the answered category of Q&A. So if you want to see all of the questions that are answered, all you have to do is click that tab, and you can see that as we go along. Any questions about the Q&A? Go ahead and pop them up or put them in the chat. And I'll let you know now that I'm monitoring chat on this slide, but then I'm going to close it and monitor only Q&A, so your chat comments might not get seen. Okay, looks like everyone is set to go with the Q&A, and we have quite a few people on the call. So again, welcome to those of you who are just joining us. We are going to go ahead and get started with our content. And I do want to mention real quick, right after the Q&A, we have a special treat for you. Joy is going to go and feed some fish. So we will take a few minutes at the end of the webinar. If you would like to stick around, please do. We would welcome your eyes on that activity. All right, I'm closing the chat, and we are going to get started. So if you spent any time out on Hood Canal, you know what a special place it is. If you haven't spent any time out on the canal yet, let this be my recommendation to you today. If you take one thing away from this call, put the wild side of Washington on your travel bucket list. Hood Canal is famous in this region and throughout America for its beauty, recreation, shellfish, and salmon. I know I love Hood Canal oysters and Hood Canal salmon, but Hood Canal and the creatures that live in it also face serious challenges. So for example, algal blooms, hypoxia, migration barriers, and declining salmon populations. And that last one is the one that we're going to talk to you about today. Long Live the Kings has a very long history of salmon conservation and recovery in the Hood Canal watershed, beginning almost 40 years ago in 1993 with the opening of our Lilliwaup Conservation Hatchery. And here to tell you a little bit more about that is the man himself, our station manager, Rick Endicott. Rick, over to you.
Hi. I started with Long Live the Kings at Lilliwaup in May of 1993. It was a brand new hatchery manager, me, and we immediately started partnering with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and NOAA to understand what we could do to help salmon in Hood Canal. One of the very first projects we did was to continue an ongoing summer chum restoration program at Lilliwaup Creek. We'd go out and we would catch the fish, spawn them, and put them in incubators to raise. We actually started to work on recovery even before they were officially listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. It was a slow recovery, but it was working, and we're seeing the positive results of that today. Another one of our early projects was with NOAA's Manchester lab on Hood Canal coho. Myself and a WDFW employee went out in the summertime and collected baby wild coho from multiple streams around Hood Canal, reared them to adults at Lilliwaup in 20-foot circular tanks. We built a spawning channel right outside in our parking lot and surrounded it with a fence and plastic so we could have observers come out to study the fish spawning. We also worked with NOAA and WDFW to start the Hood Canal Chinook Restoration Plan, which was rearing juvenile Chinook from George Adams Hatchery at Duckabush, Hamma Hamma, and Dewato. Later, we focused more intensely on the Hamma Hamma, and that was very successful. We had hundreds of Chinook coming back every year. Those early partnerships developed when Long Live the Kings first started this hatchery based on science and experimentation on how to best restore wild fish of all stocks. All of those partnerships are still in place, and the people that we were working with then are still our major partners now. I've been working here for 37 years. And I believe I misspoke because that's 27 years. I'm not that old. 27 years I've been working here at Lilliwaup. And you know, I think the most rewarding part of all of it is that I've actually been able to have a career, an entire career, which is slowly coming to an end, and it's been a really rewarding career. And I'm very, very pleased to have been here the entire time.
Thank you, Rick. And you didn't misspeak. You were copying my misspeaking earlier. I also said almost 40. It should be almost 30. Neither of us are that old.
Well, I am that old, but...
So over those almost 30 years, almost 3 decades at Lilliwaup, Rick and Joy, along with the rest of us at Long Live the Kings and our partners, have worked all over the Hood Canal region. You can see the places that we've worked highlighted on this map, working on recovering wild fish populations in these highlighted watersheds throughout the canal, monitoring fish health at some of these specific sites, sampling and tagging fish, determining the causes of poor steelhead survival at the Hood Canal Bridge, which I can go more into on the Q&A since I see there's some interest already coming up in that, and installing solutions. This is upcoming work, installing solutions to help fish pass that barrier, and then ultimately translating the lessons that we're learning in the field and through our project work into region-wide recovery plans to benefit salmon populations and support healthy ecosystems throughout the Salish Sea. We're really proud of the work that we've done here in Hood Canal and the progress that we've made towards recovering wild salmon and steelhead populations through our work at Lilliwaup and also with our partners around the canal. We've supplemented and monitored threatened Chinook, steelhead, and summer chum populations in many of the Hood Canal watersheds that are pictured here. And all of our projects are designed to ensure that fish remain wild enough to survive on their own. They are truly supplementation projects rather than replacing the natural population. In fact, our work on summer chum recovery has been so successful that it is one of only 2 salmon populations in Washington that has real potential to be removed from the Endangered Species Act in the coming years. So our special treat for you today, our senior fish biologist, Joy, is going to show you what her day-to-day at Lilliwaup looks like. She's going to take you on some tours of the fieldwork and recovery activities that we have managed to do over the past, decades, including some of the seasonal fieldwork that we've been able to continue safely this year during the current pandemic situation. Joy, it's all you.
Thank you, Iris, and welcome. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I have been lucky enough for the last 19 years to work as a steelhead biologist for Long Live the Kings with Rick at our Lilliwaup Conservation Field Station here behind me. And our duties change throughout the season and the returning salmon. And most days begin with coming here, making sure that our water is running and feeding the fish. Throughout the year, we will sample all the fish that we have on site, which is just weighing and measuring them so that we can determine their ration and their diet. And in the fall, we begin summer chum and fall Chinook monitoring, which basically is just us going out on the rivers, observing and counting spawning adults, as well as collecting some data off of the carcasses. And we just wrapped up our winter steelhead surveys, which begin in February and run through July. And next week, we will begin our summer par sampling fieldwork, which basically means we just go out to hook and line sample juvenile steelhead. And we're doing that to monitor the genetic diversity through our supplementation efforts. And so it's never a dull day, and thankfully we are always in beautiful places. In the next few slides, I'm going to show you how we survey rivers, sample salmon eggs, rear fish, and release healthy adults. Along the way, we'll talk about why we do this work and how it's important to continue. So this is a video that I shot on the South Fork Skokomish River. I did about a 5-mile survey this day. We break the river up into reaches and monitor throughout the spawning season, counting every red. Right there circled is a red, which is the nest where the salmon have laid their eggs. We do this throughout Hood Canal, working with our partners on the Hood Canal Steelhead Project. We have about 16 partners there, and it's a wonderful collaboration. And so these surveys are called red surveys. And we'll go in a little bit more about what a red is. And obviously through this pandemic, the fieldwork has been a little different, and taking precautions, we've been able to continue both red surveys and adult releases. And even in some cases, we've stepped in to help our partners who haven't been able to conduct their field surveys so that we can not have any data gaps for our Hood Canal Steelhead project. You can see that in this survey, I believe I found about 5 reds over the 5 miles. This was about average for this time of year. This was in May. And a red survey, you're basically just walking the banks of the river, some kind of zigzagging. Here I'm crossing a pretty deep pool. And that's to ensure that we can see both sides of the river, stay safe, and make sure that we don't miss any reds along the way. When we find a red, we put a flagged rock in the middle, as well as measure the red and GPS it so we can inventory it into the Hood Canal Steelhead Project database. We see lots of wildlife, bears, eagles. Here's an otter, the 4th otter I saw that day. And so these fish, no matter what stage of their life, they are definitely under a lot of pressure to survive and to spawn. And so this is an annual survey that we've been doing to monitor the supplementation of our Hood Canal Steelhead Project. And like I said, February to about July on the west side rivers. So a red is a nest where the salmon lay their eggs. Here are a pair of summer chum, which I videoed last year here in Lilliwaup Creek. The female is the one in the forefront there digging. She does quite a lot of work, selecting the site, making sure that the gravel and the water flow is just right for her and for her eggs to survive until they hatch and can migrate out of the gravel and into the river. And there you see the male, and in their courtship process, he will cross back and forth over her fin And every so often you'll see him go up on the side and do these little quivers. And that's just their courtship, and to let her know that he's her fella. He'll be chasing off other males and they'll both maintain their territory. And then when it's time to spawn and her nest depression is just how she likes, she will release her eggs, he will release his milts. The fertilization occurs as the eggs are falling into the nest pocket. And then after all is said and done, and they've worked so hard and she's made sure that these eggs will survive, she covers the nest up. And so as we're walking along the river, we're looking for a little nest depression and then the tail spill, which is where the gravel that she's covered has piled up and accumulated. So why is the substrate important? Here in this picture, you can see the gravel versus the cobble. And the size is key. The gravel is ideal. Small, medium-sized rocks, obviously not too big because her tail is doing the digging, and not too fine because that fine sediment will actually get into the red and suffocate the eggs so that they won't be able to get enough oxygen. Or when they've incubated long enough and are emerging from the gravel, it can actually create almost like a concrete cement type effect so that the alevins cannot actually swim out of the red. And when we're doing our red surveys, this is what we're looking for. It's a little hard to see because of the glare, but as you can see, there's the regular river bottom with a little bit of algae, and then this almost shiny cleared gravel. And so as we're walking along, we're looking for these reds, which are typically an oval shaped or like an ice cream cone. And they typically occur at the bottom at this transition point between pools and riffles. And so as we're walking along, we're really just trying to identify every one of these reds. And the reason that identifying these reds is so important is because it gives us an idea of how many adults have made it back to the river to spawn, as well as an idea of how many juveniles will be in the river. So for steelhead, science has shown us that 1.6 reds per female will be created with a sex ratio of 1 to 1. So for 5, if we found 5 reds, we would assume that's 3 females and 3 males or 6 adults. So over the course of the season, if we find 100 reds, we can assume that there is, or quantify that there will be 125 adults that made it back to spawn. And this is a picture of actually what the eggs look like that are in the red. These have probably been incubating for about 30 days. And you can see those black dots are actually the eyes, the fish eyes, and they develop early on. And as the embryo continues to develop, it will actually absorb that egg sac, which is all of its nutrients that it needs. Once it hatches, it's called an alevin. It continues to absorb those nutrients until it's strong enough to swim up and out through the gravel and into the river, at which point it begins feeding. Here is a video that we took for our Hood Canal Steelhead project. We collected our fish by actually using a hydraulic pump and blasting the eggs out of the gravel. It's a little hard to see, but every so often you can see the pink egg coming out of the gravel. Once the eggs have developed enough, the embryos have developed enough, they are pretty much indestructible. If you handle them too early or too late, they will actually die and be destroyed. So we know by our red surveys and using a calculation of water temperature, how long the eggs have incubated and at what point they are actually ready to be removed from the gravel and spawn. And we raise a portion of these until they're juveniles, at which point we release them back into the river. And then they will actually migrate out into the saltwater. This is just kind of an idea of the progression of development. Starting on the left is the fertilized egg. And you can see the next vial shows a little bit of development and the eyes are formed. The third is, you kind of can see a little bit more of a fish. Some have begun to hatch. The fourth there, that's the alevin stage. And between the fourth and the fifth is about the time that they will swim up and out of the red. And then that last one on the right is at the fry stage. And some species will migrate out of the river, like a chum, as a fry and into the saltwater, and which is why the eelgrass in nearshore habitat is so important. Others, like the coho and the steelhead, will stay in the freshwater for a year or two until they're ready to actually migrate out to the saltwater. And so here we are at a video of some adults that we have in the tank here at Lilliwaup. And we raise a portion, like I said, until they're juveniles and some until they're adults. We try to mimic their growth just to be as what we would see in wild fish. And we want their fitness to be as high as it can. And so we very minimal interactions and low densities, and these fish are just healthy and beautiful. We raise the adults until they are mature and ready to spawn, at which point we release them back into the rivers where they came from. This video is highlighting our North Fork Skokomish release this year. That's a female. And we wait until they're ready to spawn. And so she will be expressing eggs, and the males will be ready and expressing milk. At this point, we take a genetic sample so that we can pair up our work of juveniles and the impacts or the benefits of our supplementation. And then we haul them off back to their river. A portion of these went to a site about 4 miles below the dam here at Lake Kokanee, which is lower Lake Cushman. And this group got released at the bottom of the dam with the help of our partners at Tacoma Power Utility. When we get to the dam, we unload the fish from our tank into their tank, because to get the fish down to the release site here is quite an adventure. They get hauled with this crane and moved from the parking lot down onto the elevator. This is all an incredible amount of effort, and we're very thankful for our partners there. And the fish have a wild ride. Down, down, down. Many stairs that we get to walk down. You can see there on the right. And this is some of the most beautiful spawning habitat in the river. There's these deep, beautiful pools. It's besides the dam right there, it really does look just like a wild river because the flows of the dam keep the river somewhat stable. So the watershed is just beautiful and intact. Once we get the fish down to the bottom of the dam here, or the elevator, we release them into this beautiful pool. You can see them kind of flopping around. They have oxygen and they're really not stressed, and they are just ready to go and spawn. And so the last time they were in this water is when they were eggs before they were removed. And we're very thankful to work also with the Skokomish tribe on this project, who are just wonderful partners. And so they'll spawn typically within about 24 to 50 hours usually, because we don't want them in the river and have them be subject to predation or any type of issues that might, waste these beautiful fish. And it's such a wonderful experience to release them back into the river. And it's absolutely so rewarding. We are so passionate here at Long Live the Kings about the work that we do, the partnerships we are a part of, the beautiful watersheds we get to work in, and the majestic species we get to work with. And it really is more than a job. Our goal and hope is, as we implement these recovery efforts, is to put ourselves out of a job so that these runs can sustain themselves for generations to come. With each adult coming back to spawn, so with it comes hope for the next generation. The adversity they face at every stage of their life is overwhelming, and yet they persevere and survive. We hope to help boost the population so they not only survive, but thrive. And it takes more than us here at Long Live the Kings. It takes all of us working together to keep Puget Sound and Hood Canal healthy and vibrant, So our children's children can marvel in what connects us all with the mountains, the rivers, and the sea, our majestic salmon and steelhead.
I love it when you get poetic. That was honestly inspiring. Thank you all so much for joining us on this brief tour of the work that we do at Lilliwaup and throughout Hood Canal. Jack, if you wouldn't mind turning Rick's video back on for him, I'm going to go ahead and start the Q&A. Again, thank you all so much for being here, and thanks to Joy and Rick for taking time out of their beautiful fieldwork days to join us instead of, being out there with the fish. So the way that Q&A is gonna work, I've answered a couple questions as we went along, but I certainly could not answer all of these questions. So I'm just gonna toss the questions over to you all. I know you can't see them on your screen, but I will tell them to you, and I will try to type the answer in as you say it so that folks can both hear you and see the answer. So the first question I have for you is one that I don't know the answer to, and I'm just really hoping that you guys will, because I love it. It's from Larry Franks at the Issaquah Hatchery, and he's asking, he's heard that the indigenous name Hamma Hamma translates to stinky stinky, inspired by rotting salmon carcasses in the late fall. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I learned something today. I'm going to type yes and send that answer in, so now it's in the answered questions.
In fact, my son calls it the stinky stinky, not the hamma hamma. It's really funny, yeah.
I might have to start using that name too. I mean, Lilliwaup can get pretty stinky when we see when we have the rotting chum carcasses out there. I remember going on a tour once and just that time that someone's dog rolled in it.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
especially on the years where there's pink salmon, the humpies. We went snorkeling a handful of years ago, and there were probably close to 30,000 pinks in the river, in addition to all the chum and all of the chinook. And so, I mean, just snorkeling along, it's just piles of carcasses on the bottom, let alone whatever ends up on the shore and up in the forest. Yeah.
Here's another question that I think you've answered a little bit already during the presentation, but let's go ahead and answer it specifically. It's from Kathy Collings. Do the other species of salmon like king or sockeye spawn on Hood Canal? And if not, where do they spawn?
Kings spawn some in the Hamma Hamma River, a lot in the Skokomish River. Sockeye program is just beginning in the North Fork of the Skokomish from Tacoma Power and the Skokomish tribe. They are getting their first returns this year. I think there's about 100 sockeye that have returned, and that's year one. So they're just beginning. We're still in the process of trying to create with everyone Chinook recovery programs. They're in the works. But there are some Chinook in the Hamma Hamma still, and a lot of the hatchery fish and some wild fish in the Skokomish Chinook. But that's about it.
This kind of highlights one of Rick's early tasks, which was going up into the staircase above Lake Cushman to actually collect samples on the Chinook, which, I mean, Rick, do you want to talk about why that population is so significant above the dam there?
Well, when I first started here with Along with the Kings, one of the very first things I did was try to come up with a stock of Chinook that was not the typical hatchery stock that's in Hood Canal. So we got permission from the Park Service to go up and collect DNA of fish in the staircase area up in the National Park above Lake Cushman. And I collected, I think, close to 60 samples. And the funny thing about them was they were spawning in November. And all of our other Chinook in Hood Canal spawn in September. So we were very interested in those, but the genetic experts said that the genes were too compressed and not enough variability. and we were denied access to work with them. So it's an interesting project.
We are
Rick was
working in partnership, sorry Iris, with Tacoma Power also on the North Fork to reintroduce a spring Chinook stock. And the thought being is that the timing in Hood Canal with the glaciers that feed the watershed is that quite possibly the spring Chinook, as far as timing, might be the better species of what was actually native to Hood Canal. As Rick mentioned, a lot of the hatcheries, well, all the hatcheries in Hood Canal supplemented their stock originally and continue to with a Green River origin Chinook. And so they're in the canal now and they'll start spawning in August, which is very early for what we would expect as far as what the Chinook like when they spawn as far as water temperature and flows.
Joy, can you go back, take us back to the basics for just a second and tell me what run timing is? What's a spring Chinook versus a fall or summer Chinook?
Okay, well, fall Chinook, it will come into the rivers typically around the beginning of fall or late summer and will actually spawn through the fall. The spring Chinook will come in the rivers. Rick, help me out here. In
April, May, June, and still spawn in September and October.
And then they, stay in the river a bit longer. One of the thoughts is that by having the fish enter the river earlier, there's greater flow and cooler temperatures to kind of help get them up into the upper watersheds where Chinook like to spawn. Chum and coho tend to kind of spawn lower down in the rivers along with the pink salmon. And so like the winter steelhead, they come in the river starting in about January or February and will spawn into June or July. And maybe one point to say too is the difference between a steelhead and all the other species of salmon is that after a steelhead spawns, it will actually go back out to the ocean, feed for another year or two, and then return back to the river to spawn again. Whereas the other species of salmon, after they spawn, their body just breaks down and they die. That's their mission and that's how they've evolved to be. So the steelhead and we've supplemented for years. The program that actually led into the Hood Canal Steelhead Project was the Hamma Steelhead Supplementation Program. And we released a fish who we called Big Bertha. She was a female. We released her and she spawned in one location. We should say that every adult that we release, in addition to the genetic fin clips, gets an external tag right by their dorsal fin with a unique ID number. So we can track them, or if anglers catch them out in the ocean, we have an idea of where they've gone. And this fish we caught, hook and line sampling the year after we released her, and then not the next year, but then the following year, which means she would have been 8 years old. So it was really wonderful and inspiring to see that this fish that spent 4 years in our tanks here at Lilliwaup could survive and continue to spawn and be productive in that system.
For those of you who like fancy words, steelhead are idiroparous. That's the word meaning they can spawn multiple times. And other salmon species are semelparous. They die after they spawn that first time. I'm going to be greedy and take the next question for myself. We've had a few questions coming up about Hood Canal Bridge, and I manage that project, so I'm just going to step in and take those questions. So the questions that are coming up are, why is the Hood Canal Bridge a hazard for migrating salmon, and how much of an impact does it have on fish passage? And so we've done quite a bit of work to try and understand this, partnering with NOAA and the Hood Canal Coordinating Council and the Port Gamble Scollum Tribe and Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and a few other groups in the region. We did a 2-year intensive fieldwork study to understand exactly how the bridge is impacting outmigrating steelhead. And the reason we studied steelhead is because those fish, when they outmigrate, are large enough to put acoustic tags in. Chum and Chinook, when they're outmigrating, are so small that the tags are a little bit too heavy for them. We didn't want to try to tag those smaller fish. So we tagged outmigrating steelhead with these acoustic tags that emit a little individualized ping signal. And then we had receivers throughout the canal, at the bridge, and then later along in the migration journey that were listening for those pings so we could hear what happened to the fish. We found that across our 2 years of study, about half of the fish that made it to the bridge died at the bridge, mostly right along the south side. And through other extensive work going on up there, what we've come up with, and a lot of work went into this. I'm glossing over so much work that our partners did. Believe me, it was a real effort and they were amazing. But the end result was that we believe that the bridge serves as a barrier for the migrating fish. It is a floating bridge which extends about 15 feet down into the water column, and steelhead migrate in the upper 3 feet of the water column. They really don't like to dive down any deeper than that until they get a little bit farther out into the ocean and a little bit bigger. So the bridge, when they encounter it, acts as a barrier. They don't understand how to get past it, and as they cluster up behind the bridge and try to figure out how to get past it, they are subject to increased predation by harbor seals and other animals in that area. The predominant predator for steelhead is most likely harbor seals. There are other species of marine mammals and birds that may also contribute, especially for smaller species like chum and chinook. And we have some initial work suggesting that there may be an impact to those smaller species as well. However, we don't have quantitative data yet to tell you exactly how much of an impact it is. We are moving forward with this work into phase 2 over the next few years, which is where we're going to actually install solutions on the infrastructure. And these solutions are, there are a couple specific points on the infrastructure where fish appear to get hung up. So we are going to, we're working with a team of engineers to design ways to guide the fish around those structures and get them past the bridge faster so that they aren't subject to predation. So stay tuned. We will have results of whether those solutions are working and how effective they are and how much we can improve survival at the bridge within the next few years. All right, back to Rick and Joy. What's the estimated number of returning Chinook to Hood Canal this year? Is that something you know off the top of your head, or you'd have to look it up?
This year?
Yeah, give me a ballpark.
I don't personally think there's any way to do that. Last year we were supposed to have a pretty good return and it was dismal. This year the George Adams and Hoodsport hatcheries are supposed to have average to better than average returns, which means 20,000 fish, most of which are harvested, and the hatcheries try to take in what they need for their egg take. But as far as wild Chinook coming back, we're talking in the hundreds, less than 100 in the whole entire canal. So the Hamma might get 100 to 200 fish if we're really lucky. And the Skokomish has some wild escapement, but it's not impressive.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember you all telling me a little bit about this. Over the past few years, we've seen some really interesting patterns that are unexpected and potentially due to ocean conditions. So we've been seeing these marine heat waves and the big warm blob in 2015 and 2016, and we think that those might be contributing to the increasingly variable population fluctuations, not only in Hood Canal, but also throughout the Salish Sea.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, let's see.
So George Adams Hatchery has been the most productive of all the Chinook hatcheries, I think, in Puget Sound. So we will have some Chinook.
Here's a question from Elena, and it's a little bit of a what's your opinion question, which are always the most fun to answer. Do you think that we will be able to do enough to improve fish health to save our local southern resident orcas?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I'm so glad you said yes. So just some background for folks on the call who might not be as familiar with the southern resident. the issues facing southern resident killer whales or orcas. Over the past couple of years, southern resident orcas have become increasingly in the limelight as their population has declined, and Governor Inslee had formed a task force to understand why and what we can do about it. And all of that work boils down to three major threats facing our local orcas. One is pollution and contamination. So they accumulate contaminants in their bodies, and when they birth their calves, those contaminants are fed to the calves through the mother's milk. So this is clearly not great for the health of the population. Another is noise, predominantly from vessel traffic. Southern residents are fish eaters, and they are communal. They communicate with each other heavily to target and catch fish. And so if noise levels are too high, they're not able to effectively communicate, they're not able to effectively forage and feed themselves. And then the third reason, and the most important in our eyes, is a lack of food. Southern residents love to eat Chinook salmon, especially large Chinook salmon, because if you're chasing a fish, you want it to be as big as it possibly can be, so you can get as much energy with as least effort as you can put in. And unfortunately, the declining status of many of our Chinook populations and the listing of Puget Sound Chinook as threatened under the Endangered Species Act has reduced the amount of food available to the southern residents in this area. We are working, you've heard about the work that we're doing at Lilliwaup Hatchery, but we also have another facility up in Orcas Island. It's called Glenwood Springs, and that's actually a facility that's focused on Chinook, and we have some experimental work going on up there that's actually intended to increase the survival of Chinook once they're in the ocean, and also try to bring them back at larger sizes and older ages, so the kind of fish that those southern residents prefer to eat. So I think we're going to be able to do enough, not us specifically, but throughout the region. So I agree with this, yes, this optimism. It's a big problem. We got to keep working at it. We have time for maybe a couple more questions before we get to go feed the fish with Joy. So let me see. Do we work with the HSRG to establish our enhancement goals? Do you two want to talk about the work that we've done over the past couple of decades with the hatchery reform project and how we've led work on that? Maybe Joy?
Well, I was going to say maybe Rick, because he was there for the whole entire ride.
Rick, take us on a roller coaster.
Yeah, I'll jump in.
To be honest, the HSRG is something that Joy and I were supportive of, but it was more of along with the King's administrative staff that was responsible for it. We implemented what we were asked to implement here at our hatchery, as did all the other hatcheries in the area. Basically just called for quality instead of quantity at fish hatcheries. Great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And we've never ever overcrowded our fish. We've never released more than we should. I don't know if I'm answering the question or not.
No, that was great. So that question was from Ray Glaze, and Ray, we LLTK, this was before my time at the organization, but my boss worked heavily on it. We actually were tapped to lead the hatchery reform process in the mid-90s. There's more information on our website if you'd like to check it out there, or follow up with me directly afterwards. Let's see. What were historically the major rivers for Chinook and Hood Canal, and what are the top 3 obstacles for the recovery of those runs?
Ooh.
Everyone is really interested in Chinook on the call today.
Yeah.
Repeat that question.
What were historically the major rivers for Chinook and Hood Canal? And then the second part is what are the top 3 obstacles for Chinook recovery?
Skokomish was obviously the best, most popular river for Chinook. The Dosey Wallops is rumored to have had spring Chinook and fall Chinook. There might be some left. We don't see them, but some people do say there are some there. The Duckabush obviously had spring Chinook back in the day when the hatchery was first built there in 1910. There were Chinook in the river, and the Hamma Hamma has had a few. But the dominant Chinook river in Hood Canal was the Skokomish, and it was a very good Chinook river, North Fork and South Fork before the dams and all the logging and everything. Historically, there were Chinook here, and it was an unbelievable blackmouth fishery. That's a winter blackmouth, small Chinook fishing in the winter here. It was limitless. There was, growing up here in the 60s and 70s, the blackmouth fishing in Hood Canal was as good as you could ever have fishing. So yes, it has a great history of Chinook, but right now it's not doing too well.
I'm going to stop the screen share for just a second here so we can see our faces before we let Joy take over. I have two more, hopefully quick questions, but actually let's revisit the second part of that first question, because I think we didn't actually answer it.
Oh.
What's the main obstacle to Chinook recovery right now?
There doesn't seem to be a stock of fish that is capable of surviving on its own here, and we're trying to figure it out.
And you think our work reintroducing spring Chinook is going to be helpful there?
It's totally possible that what we had here, and even what we had as far as a blackmouth fishery, it's totally possible that that could have been spring Chinook from the Dosey Wallops and the Duckabush before they were exterminated. So everybody has a theory, but it's really difficult to figure it out because they just don't seem to do well on their own in any of the rivers. So
I think a point here too might be the habitat, in that the historic logging effects are really catching up to the quality of habitat for rearing. So a lot of these rivers have graded over time, so they've filled up with substrate, and so there's not really the depth and the quality of rearing habitat in the rivers as there once historically might have been.
it's totally possible.
Habitat restoration is one of those really high priority items in your mind.
Well, yeah,
Totally
I mean,
possible that Chinook needed the deep water estuaries that they used to have. Like for instance, the Skokomish River, it's documented that barges went up the slough to the 101 bridge on the Skokomish River and delivered lumber for the homesteads up there.
which is miles.
Which is miles and miles upstream, which means that channel was 20 to 30 feet deep. And it was an estuary for miles, and now the estuary is gone and it's gravel 6 inches deep. And logic would tell you, common sense would tell you that that had an impact on juvenile fish.
And I think also, most of the mouths of these rivers, if you go down at certain tides, you'll see are just lined with seals. And like we're seeing at the bridge, of predation having a large effect. I think that, it's just the seal population is out of control. And for a few years there, after the whales, the orcas were in Hood Canal for almost 2 months. We had pretty good
The transient orcas, the ones that eat seals, not the southern residents. Yeah.
Right. I know. Somebody said that what we need to do to save the orcas is teach them how to eat seals. It's like, well, they've evolved just a little differently. But, and early on, we did a community meeting, and one of the participants, who was a, 6th generation up on the Dosey Wallops, an attendee at the meeting, actually asked, if we have all these seals, why aren't we out there trying to do something with that population? They are protected. I mean, there's obviously, the whole chain of life. That
I think we could have a whole nother call on what we're thinking about that.
So I think, those 3 things quite possibly could be contributing factors, as well as, like you mentioned, what they're facing in the ocean and food availability at every stage of their life and such. That's a great question, though.
It is a good question. We definitely could talk about that for a whole nother hour. And if you're interested in what we're doing to look at and understand and perhaps address pinniped predation, not in Hood Canal specifically, but at other regions in Puget Sound, feel free to connect with me or Joy or Rick, who will direct you to me after this call. I don't think we have it on our website, but you may have also heard a little bit about that work through the mailings that you receive from Long Live the Kings if you're on our mailing list. One last quick question before we take a tour to Feed the Fish with Joy. And that quick question is, are we currently partnering with any angling groups in Hood Canal?
Yeah, no, we partner with pretty much everybody that we possibly can. However, in Hood Canal, there's very few angling groups. The Puget Sound Anglers we've partnered with in the past, Trout Unlimited. Yeah, so it's Wild Fish Conservancy. We've worked some on with habitat, you know, in the same rivers and habitat projects that they've been working on. So it's, I think Long Live the Kings, we're friends of people that are doing good work and have good ethics and agree that we all are in it together for our, you know, healthy salmon and steelhead populations.
Agreed. One of the reasons that I love working at Long Live the Kings, and I have been there for 8.5 years now, y'all. How amazing is that? One of the reasons that I love working at Long Live the Kings is our focus on partnerships and getting to work with partners throughout the region. It is really just the most incredible experience. So speaking of incredible experiences, super awesome segue. Congratulations, Iris. Let's go feed the fish with Joy.
Okay. Well,
Joy is going to take us on a journey, and the tanks can get loud, but we tested this yesterday, and we think we can hear Joy over them. Joy, if at any point it gets weird, I might put you on mute, and Rick can keep talking about what you're doing.
Okay, that sounds great. First, I'll give you just an overview while we're up here, but our facility has 10-foot tanks. We have 12 of those, and then 16 of these 20-foot tanks. And so as the fish grow, we move them from our incubation and indoor rearing area out to the 10-foot tanks. And then as they get even bigger, we move them into the 20-foot tanks. And we always like them to have as much space, and so our densities are very low, and we don't feed them a very large diet. It's based off of our sampling, like I said earlier, that we're trying to mimic their growth as what we would see in wild fish. So I'm going to flip you around and take you down to feed our 3-year-old North Fork steelhead. They are soon to be 4, and we will release them next year. These are the leftovers from our adult release this year, who were not quite mature. They mature between age 3 and 4, sometimes even 5. So I'm take you on a little walk around Lilliwaup, and I might be a little bumpy, so I beg your pardon. And here we go. One thing that makes Lilliwaup so special is our water is all this pristine, beautiful, spring-fed water that is gravity flows. So as far as technology and things go wrong, knock on wood, there's very little that, you know, we need power to run or that can go out. So this is a fish. It's definitely in part due to our experience, but in part to the water that we have available here. And one reason why years ago, Rick kind of brought to the attention that Long Live the King should partner here. We keep our tanks covered with bird netting, where you can see the water coming in. And this is to prevent ospreys and heron and eagles from enjoying some tasty morsels. And we feed them a pellet, which is shrimp and fish and crab meal. So here we go. I'm not going to drop. Okay, they're hungry.
Oh my gosh, look at all that. They are hungry.
Can you see okay?
You're cutting in and out a little bit, but it looks beautiful to me. So these are the normal pellets that you use. Can you give us like or maybe Rick, can you give us a 3-second about the other small project, the other experimental project that we have going on here, trying to feed fish with a more sustainable type of feed?
Oh, we came up with a plan to work with a mealworm company, see if we could raise fish on mealworms. And we've been working on that for a few years. We did one group for a year on mealworms versus fish food, and 100% mealworms for an entire year, and the fish did really well. The problem is getting enough poundage and enough biomass of mealworms to actually operate a hatchery, because you're using 50 to 100 pounds a day of fish food sometimes. So, but we're still working on it. We're working on it.
Tell us why that's more sustainable than a fish-based feed like that we currently
Mostly
use.
because fish food is made out of fish. So we're mining the ocean to make fish food to put fish back in the ocean.
And it's something like 2 pounds of fish go into 1 pound of feed, right?
Right, it's terrible. So if we could eliminate having to kill krill and bait fish and stuff to make fish meal and fish pellets, we could eliminate that entire part of the destruction of the biomass out there. So hopefully someday we will feed with mealworms.
Did you guys get to eat any of the fish that you raised on mealworms during that experiment?
No, but we sent, obviously, but we sent a bunch of fish up to Seattle. Some raised on mealworms and some raised on fish food, and a fancy restaurant up there did a taste test, a blind taste test. And some of the people could tell the difference. Some of them said the mealworm fish were more flaky. Some said the fish food were more flaky. Some said more oil. So everybody had a different opinion, but the bottom line is the fish that were fed mealworms tasted just fine. And they had good quality meat, and it was very interesting. So fish farming could be used, mealworms, and take a big load off the biomass. So
I didn't get to participate in that taste test, but I'm holding you two accountable for letting me try the next time.
that we will do. We didn't get to try it either.
You all should have kept a fish for yourself.
Yeah, we probably
Joy,
did.
what are we seeing now?
Joy's walking over to another tank, maybe one that you can see the fish better in. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Beautiful. I'm going to ask you one more question from the Q&A that just popped up. Did you get to eat any of the mealworms?
Yeah, we all tried one.
Did you really?
Yeah, they're totally edible. Yeah.
How'd they taste? I remember we had, in the admin office, we had a little jar of them on the kitchen table at one point, like they were, candy or nuts, and I never actually ate them.
They're fine. They tasted kind of like you would expect. Not very flavorful, but not bad tasting.
Good source of protein.
Totally edible. We could live on them.
I hope we don't have to.
Very high protein.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, we have exactly 1 minute left here. So any ending thoughts, any parting thoughts before we go? And Rick, I think this is just you, since it looks like Joy's frozen her video for a moment here.
Parting thoughts. Well, I just would encourage anyone who's on this show today to call us and come out and see the place. That'd be my invitation to anyone to come out and see what we're doing and have some actual time to talk and do a Q&A that you can take your time.
In-person Q&A.
In person, yeah.
That was actually one of the questions that I answered while you all were talking. Someone asked whether they could come and tour the facility. And, oh, Joy, you're back. Hooray. And my answer is yes, absolutely. We'd love to have you out there. We are, you know, currently operating under the restrictions and guidance from our governor and from the CDC. But when the pandemic has eased and we can safely accommodate large groups again, we certainly welcome tours. We love to have folks out there. We love to talk about what we do. Joy's disappeared, so yeah, give us a call. And thank you all so much for being on this webinar today. If you had to step away at any point, I believe we are recording and we will be posting it up on our YouTube so that you can go back and rewatch and see it all again. Watch those amazing videos of Joy feeding the fish. And if you have any further Q&A questions, you have my email. It's ikemp@lltk.org, or you can always just contact info@lltk.org, and whoever is monitoring that email that day will send you one of our way, me or Rick or Joy. Thanks again so much. We love hosting these. We love talking about our work, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you all for joining. Bye from Lilliwaup.